My name is Chloe, and I am 32 years old. Last summer at our family reunion, my entire world shifted when the truth I had suspected for years finally came to light. For over 15 years, my parents had painted me as the family villain, the troubled child who could never do right. It began unraveling when I found those old journals in the attic revealing a calculated campaign of lies that had shaped my entire identity. Now, as their web of deception collapses around them, I finally understand that the problem was never me. Before I dive into my story, let me know where you are watching from and hit that like and subscribe button, because the truth always finds its way to the surface, especially when it comes to family secrets. I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Connecticut with perfectly trimmed lawns and families that seemed equally well manicured from the outside. My parents, James and Diane Anderson, were pillars of the community. Dad worked as a financial advisor at a prestigious firm, while Mum served on various community boards and charity committees. Our house was always immaculate, ready for unexpected visitors or impromptu neighborhood gatherings. In our family portrait, I was the middle child sandwiched between my older brother Thomas, who excelled at everything academic, and my younger sister Abigail, who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Thomas was 4 years older than me, destined for an Ivy League education from the moment he brought home his first perfect report card. Abigail was 3 years younger, with golden curls and a smile that charmed everyone she met. And then there was me, the middle child with unruly dark hair and too many questions. Even from a young age, I noticed the difference in how my parents treated us. When Thomas received praise for his achievements, it was expected. When Abigail accomplished anything, it was celebrated extensively. But when I succeeded at something, it was met with skepticism or quickly dismissed. At the time, I chalked it up to middle child syndrome or just family dynamics that I did not fully understand. My parents were obsessed with how we appeared to others. Our clothes were always pristine, our manners impeccable when in public. But behind closed doors, there was a different standard for each of us. I remember once when I was 9, we attended a neighborhood barbecue. Thomas had been allowed to wear casual clothes, and Abigail was adorable in her little sundress. But Mum had forced me into an uncomfortable formal outfit that was completely inappropriate for the occasion. When I complained, she hissed, "You need to make a better impression than your usual sloppy self." My personality never seemed to fit what my parents wanted. I was creative and free-spirited. I loved art, writing stories, and exploring the woods behind our house. My mother would sigh dramatically when she found me with paint on my hands or dirt on my clothes. "Why can't you be more like your sister? Look how clean she always keeps herself," she would say, despite the fact that Abigail was younger and received much more help with everything. By the time I was 10, the label of being difficult had firmly attached itself to me. If something went wrong in our house, I was the first person blamed. A broken vase. Must have been Chloe, even if I was not home when it happened. Missing cookies from the jar. Clearly Chloe took them, never mind that I did not even like that kind. The first time I clearly remember my parents lying about me was during a family dinner with my grandparents. I had received an A on a difficult science project that day, and I excitedly started to tell everyone about it. Before I could finish, my mother interrupted with a laugh. "Chloe has such an imagination. Her teacher actually called me today because she barely turned in any work this semester." I was stunned into silence. It was completely untrue, but when I tried to protest, my father gave me that look that meant I should not contradict my mother in front of others. Our extended family gradually began to view me through the lens my parents had created. My grandparents would bring special treats for Thomas and Abigail, but only generic gifts for me. Aunts and uncles would greet my siblings warmly, but approach me with caution, as if expecting problematic behavior. Cousins were subtly discouraged from getting too close to me. At family gatherings, I would overhear whispers about the troubled middle child or poor James and Diane dealing with such a difficult daughter. When I was 12, I poured my heart into a painting for a prestigious youth art competition. I worked on it for weeks, staying up late to get every detail right. When the letter came announcing I had won first place, I was ecstatic, but my joy was short-lived. At the award ceremony, which the whole family attended, my mother pulled aside the program coordinator, within earshot of my aunts and uncles. "We are so embarrassed," she said in a stage whisper. Chloe actually traced that painting from a magazine. We had no idea she had submitted plagiarized work until it was too late. I was mortified and confused. The painting had come entirely from my imagination, inspired by a dream I had. The program coordinator looked doubtful, but could not prove anything either way. They let me keep the award, but the damage was done. On the car ride home, I cried and asked my parents why they had said such a terrible lie. My father simply said, "We know what you did, Chloe. Stop making things worse by lying about it." That night, I started the first of many journals. I needed to record what had really happened to have some record of my truth when everything around me seemed to be distorted. I hid these journals carefully, instinctively, knowing they needed to be protected. Despite the constant undermining, I tried desperately to prove my worth. I maintained excellent grades, joined clubs, and continued creating art, though I stopped sharing it with my family. I developed ways to cope with being the designated problem child, most often by withdrawing into books and my own imagination. But no matter what I accomplished, the narrative about me never changed. I was difficult. I was troubled. I was the source of any problems in our otherwise perfect family. As I entered my teenage years, the pattern of lies about me intensified dramatically. My parents seemed to gain confidence in their ability to rewrite reality, especially as I developed normal teenage independence that they interpreted as defiance. When I was 14, I came home excited about making the honor roll for the third semester in a row. I proudly showed my report card to my grandparents who were visiting for the weekend. My mother snatched it from my hands with a tight smile and said, "Oh, there must be some mistake. Chloe has been failing most of her classes. We just had a conference with her teachers last week about it." My grandparents exchanged knowing looks that said, "There she goes again, making things up." Later, when I confronted my mother privately, she shrugged and said, "Nobody likes a show-off, Chloe. Besides, it makes Thomas and Abigail feel bad when you brag." That summer, our entire extended family went on vacation to a beach house in Maine. Everyone was having a wonderful time until my Uncle Harold discovered that $200 was missing from his wallet. Before any real investigation could happen, my father cleared his throat and announced, "Chloe, we need to talk about this. Your mother saw you near Harold and Nancy's room earlier." I was blindsided. I had walked past their room on the way to the bathroom, nothing more. But soon, everyone was looking at me with suspicion. No amount of denial helped. My parents insisted that I had a problem with taking things that do not belong to me, referencing past incidents that were either completely fabricated or grossly distorted. The vacation ended with me being grounded to my room in the beach house, while everyone else enjoyed the sun and surf. I was then grounded for the remainder of the summer when we returned home. My mother told the family I was on restriction because of the stealing incident, but also mentioned concerns about inappropriate communications with older boys online that I had allegedly been hiding. This was another complete fabrication, but it accomplished their goal of painting me as not just dishonest, but promiscuous as well. The years of gaslighting took a heavy toll on my mental health. I began to doubt my own memories and perceptions. Maybe I was as terrible as they said. Maybe I had done things I could not remember. The constant emotional manipulation left me anxious and depressed. I started to withdraw even further, which my parents pointed to as evidence of my troubled nature. My grades began to suffer for the first time as I struggled with increasing self-doubt. When I brought home my first B-, my mother wasted no time informing the family that I was flunking out and that they had found concerning substances in my room. Neither was true. But once again, perception became reality in our family dynamic. Throughout these difficult years, my Aunt Margaret occasionally showed small signs of skepticism about my parents' stories. Once after my mother dramatically shared that I had gotten detention for talking back to a teacher, actually, I had been selected to help tutor younger students during that period. Aunt Margaret quietly asked me for my side of the story when no one else was around. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. Someone was at least questioning the narrative. When I was 16, my cousin Jennifer was getting married, and it was going to be the biggest family event of the year. 2 weeks before the wedding, my mother tearfully informed everyone that I could not attend because I had been caught shoplifting and was under house arrest as part of my rehabilitation program. In reality, I had never stolen anything in my life. I was devastated to miss the wedding and horrified at what my extended family now believed about me. My attempts to defend myself against these false accusations always backfired. Any protest was characterized as acting out or being defensive. If I cried, I was manipulative. If I stayed calm, I was cold and calculating. I could not win. The one bright spot during this dark time was my first serious boyfriend, Alex, whom I met in junior year. Alex came from a healthy, supportive family, and he quickly noticed the strange dynamics in mine. After witnessing several incidents where my parents blamed me for things I clearly had not done, he pulled me aside and said, "Chloe, you know what they are saying about you is not true, right? This is not normal." It was the first time anyone had so clearly validated what I had been feeling for years. Alex pointed out the inconsistencies in my parents' stories and the way they treated me differently from my siblings. He helped me see that I was not crazy for feeling unfairly targeted. We dated for almost a year, during which time my parents constantly undermined our relationship by imposing arbitrary restrictions and telling his parents fabricated concerns about my influence on their son. Despite their interference, Alex helped me maintain some sense of self-worth during that crucial time. He encouraged me to apply to colleges far from home, suggesting that distance might give me perspective on my family situation. Though our relationship eventually ended when he moved away for an early college program, his insight had planted an important seed. Maybe the problem was not me after all. When acceptance letters for college began arriving, I kept them hidden from my parents. I knew that whatever success I achieved would somehow be twisted. I applied to schools across the country, desperate for distance and a fresh start. When I was accepted to the University of Washington in Seattle, nearly 3,000 miles from Connecticut, I knew immediately it was my ticket to freedom. Telling my parents about my decision was just as difficult as I anticipated. My mother collapsed into dramatic sobs. "After everything we have done for you, this is how you repay us, by running away to the other side of the country." My father was cold and clinical. "We cannot stop you, but do not expect any financial support for this foolish decision." What hurt the most was how they portrayed my choice to the rest of the family. At a dinner supposedly to celebrate my college acceptance, which they had reluctantly arranged after my Aunt Margaret suggested it, my mother tearfully confided to everyone that I was escaping to Seattle because I am running from consequences here, and implied I was involved with a bad crowd. My father added that they were letting me go because they hoped the distance might finally make me appreciate everything they had done for me. The day I left for college was bittersweet. My brother Thomas gave me an awkward hug and whispered, "Good luck," in a way that suggested he knew something was off but could not quite put his finger on it. Abigail, then 15, seemed confused by the tension, but had long ago learned to follow our parents' lead in how to treat me. My parents put on a show for the neighbours, who came to wish me well, acting as the concerned, loving parents, sending their troubled daughter off with hopes and prayers. Arriving in Seattle was like taking my first real breath. The campus was beautiful, the mountains and water unlike anything in Connecticut. But the most remarkable thing was that nobody knew me. Nobody had heard the stories about what a difficult, dishonest person I supposedly was. I could simply be myself. My roommate Jasmine was studying psychology and came from a large, boisterous family in California. We clicked immediately. She was warm, direct, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. I was initially guarded, so used to people having preconceptions about me. But Jasmine had no agenda, no filter through which she had already decided to view me. After living together for a few months, Jasmine gently pointed out patterns in how I apologized excessively for things that were not my fault, and how I seemed surprised when people treated me with basic respect. "Has someone made you feel like you are always wrong?" she asked one night, after I had apologized 3 times for asking to borrow her notes. That simple question opened the floodgates. I told Jasmine everything about growing up as my family's scapegoat. Instead of the disbelief or dismissal I expected, she listened with growing concern. "Chloe," she said finally, "that sounds like gaslighting and emotional abuse. Have you ever talked to a therapist about this?" I had not. The idea had never occurred to me, partly because my parents had always framed therapy as something for truly troubled people, and made comments suggesting that therapists were easily manipulated by good liars. Their preemptive work to discredit any professional help I might seek had been effective. But with Jasmine's encouragement, I made an appointment at the University Counselling Centre. My first therapy sessions were revelatory. The counsellor listened to my stories and validated that what I had experienced was not normal family conflict, but a pattern of scapegoating and emotional abuse. She helped me understand that my feelings of confusion, self-doubt, and unworthiness were natural responses to years of gaslighting. While I was building a new life and understanding in Seattle, my parents continued their campaign from afar. They controlled the narrative about why I rarely came home for holidays, telling family I was too caught up in my West Coast lifestyle to care about family, rather than acknowledging that every visit home resulted in renewed psychological warfare. When they did visit campus, it was always disastrous. They would arrive and immediately begin criticizing everything from my apartment to my friends. Inevitably, they would cause a scene in a restaurant or public place and then tell everyone back home that I had embarrassed them with my behavior. After their second visit ended with my mother claiming I had made a scene at dinner, when in reality she had loudly criticized the waitstaff. Until they comped our meal out of pity, I limited their visits. Financial manipulation became their primary tool of control. Though they had initially refused to contribute to my education, they changed their minds when they realized it eliminated a source of leverage. They would arbitrarily threaten to cut off tuition payments whenever I did not comply with their demands, like coming home for a specific event or taking a class they approved of. I worked 2 part-time jobs and took out student loans to reduce my dependence on them, but it was never quite enough to break free completely. I missed many significant family events during those college years, some by choice and others because I was subtly uninvited. For my grandfather's 70th birthday celebration, my mother called to inform me that it would be better for everyone if I did not attend, since my grandparents were still upset about the Maine vacation incident from years earlier. When my cousin had a baby shower, I was told it was adults only, though later saw pictures with clearly younger cousins in attendance. After each absence, I would receive messages from various family members expressing disappointment that I chose not to attend important family milestones, reinforcing the narrative that I was selfish and family averse. The real reasons for my absence were never shared. Despite these challenges, I thrived academically. I majored in graphic design and discovered a passion and talent that brought me genuine joy. I made the Dean's List consistently and even received a prestigious internship in my junior year. Of course, my parents managed to twist even these accomplishments. When I proudly shared my Dean's List status, my mother sighed and said, "Well, the standards must be different at Washington than at real schools." When I called excitedly about my internship, my father interrupted to ask if I was finally taking school seriously then, as if I had been failing all along. After graduation, I learned from Thomas that my parents had told the extended family I had barely scraped by in college and had needed to repeat several classes, none of which was true. My graduation party back home was less a celebration of my achievement and more an opportunity for my parents to take credit for getting me through, despite my supposed academic struggles. With my degree finally in hand and the promise of a starting position at a design firm in Seattle, I made the decision to stay on the West Coast. The physical distance had begun the healing process, and I was not willing to sacrifice that progress by moving closer to the source of so much pain. The job was not glamorous or particularly well-paying, but it was mine earned without my parents' influence or interference. It was the first step toward true independence. Over the next 5 years, I built a life for myself in Seattle. I worked my way up from junior designer to art director at a respected agency. I made real friends who knew me, not the distorted version my parents had created. I continued therapy, slowly unraveling the damage done by years of being the family's scapegoat. I even adopted a cat, something my mother had always refused to allow because of Chloe's irresponsibility, despite my pleas for a pet throughout childhood. When I was 27, I met David at a charity event our agency was supporting. He was kind, thoughtful, and worked as an environmental engineer. Our relationship developed naturally, without the drama I had come to expect from personal connections. He listened when I hesitantly shared pieces of my family history, never dismissing my experiences or suggesting I was overreacting. After we had been dating for a year, David gently suggested that perhaps it was time to attempt reconciliation with my family. Not because you need to forgive them, he clarified, but because unresolved relationships can hold us back in ways we do not even realize. And maybe enough time has passed that things could be different. I was skeptical, but agreed to make an effort when my grandmother's 80th birthday celebration was announced. It seemed like a relatively safe opportunity, a large gathering where I could maintain some emotional distance while taking steps toward possible healing. The moment I walked into my grandparents' house, I felt like I had stepped back in time. The same tension, the same careful glances to see how my parents wanted others to react to me. Thomas, now a successful attorney with a wife and 2 children, gave me a genuinely warm welcome. Abigail, who had followed in our mother's footsteps with community involvement and social climbing, was politely distant. My parents performed their usual roles, greeting me with exaggerated affection for the audience of relatives, while whispering critical comments when no one could hear. During the party, I stepped into the kitchen for a moment of quiet and overheard my mother and Aunt Margaret in the adjacent dining room. "You need to keep the story straight about the college fund," Diane, my aunt, was saying. Thomas was asking questions about why Chloe struggled so much with tuition when you had college funds for all the kids. We have always supported Chloe exactly the same as the others, my mother replied tensely. She just made poor choices and wasted opportunities. You know how she is. Do I? My aunt responded, her tone surprisingly sharp. Because the Chloe I see today seems remarkably put together for someone who supposedly created so many problems. I stepped into the dining room before my mother could respond. What college fund? I asked directly. Both women startled, my mother's face immediately shifting to the cold, dismissive expression I knew so well. Oh, Chloe always eavesdropping and misunderstanding, she said with a forced laugh. We were just discussing family matters. I am family, I said firmly, and I want to know about this college fund that was supposedly for me. There you go again, twisting things, my mother said, her voice hardening. This is exactly why we had to use your college fund to pay for that car you wrecked senior year. I stared at her in genuine confusion. What car? I never wrecked any car. I did not even have a car in high school. For just a moment, my mother's composure slipped and panic flashed across her face. Not your car, Abigail's car, the one you borrowed and damaged. The insurance would not cover it because you took it without permission. She was backpedaling, creating a new lie to cover the slip. But I had never driven Abigail's car. In fact, I had barely been allowed to drive at all in high school, precisely because my parents claimed I was too irresponsible. Something clicked into place in that moment, a suspicion that had been building for years. My parents had not just been exaggerating or misinterpreting my behavior all these years. They had been deliberately, systematically lying. I left the party early, my mind racing. 2 weeks later, I took advantage of my parents' annual anniversary trip to Europe to return to Connecticut. Thomas let me into the house, believing I wanted to collect some childhood memorabilia I had left behind. In truth, I was looking for evidence. The attic was where my mother stored everything she considered important. Family records, financial documents, photo albums, all meticulously organized. In the far corner, I found several boxes labeled with my name. Inside were items I had never seen before, awards my artwork had won that had supposedly been rejected, acceptance letters to summer programs I had been told did not want me, even birthday cards from relatives with checks that had never been given to me. But the most shocking discovery came in a locked file box for which I found the key hidden in my mother's desk. Inside were her journals, dozens of them, spanning back to my childhood. With shaking hands, I opened one from when I was 13. What I read made me physically ill. Abigail failed her math test again today, my mother had written. Had to intercept the note from her teacher before James saw it. Told him Chloe was the one struggling in school instead. It is better this way. Abigail has so much potential, she just needs more time. Chloe is stronger, she can handle being the one with problems. Entry after entry detailed deliberate decisions to blame me for Abigail's mistakes, for my mother's own errors, even for my father's occasional professional setbacks that needed a family explanation. There were calculations of money diverted from my college fund to pay for Abigail's dance classes and Thomas's academic camps. There were explicit strategies for how to make extended family believe I was troubled without saying anything that could be directly refuted. One particularly painful entry read, Chloe won another art prize. Had to tell the family she cheated. Cannot have her outshining Abigail, who is struggling so much with her self-esteem. Chloe will be fine. She is stubborn like me. She will succeed no matter what obstacles she faces. Abigail needs every advantage. I photographed dozens of pages, my hands trembling so badly I had to keep retaking the pictures. I found financial statements showing a college fund in my name that had been systematically drained starting when I was 15. I found letters from school congratulating my academic achievements that had been hidden away. I even found altered family photos where my achievements had been literally cropped out of the picture before being displayed or shared with family. I sat in the attic surrounded by evidence of a lifetime of calculated betrayal and wept. It was simultaneously devastating and vindicating. I was not crazy. I had not imagined or exaggerated the unfair treatment. If anything, I had underestimated how deliberate and extensive the campaign against me had been. My mother had actively worked to present Abigail as the perfect daughter by making me the imperfect one. My father had apparently been complicit, using me as a convenient explanation for anything that threatened his image of faultless success. I carefully returned everything except the photos I had taken on my phone, plus a few pieces of concrete evidence I could not bear to leave behind, including one of my mother's journals that detailed the most egregious lies. Then I left the house, texted Thomas a thank you for letting me in, and flew back to Seattle with my world completely upended once again. Back in Seattle, I fell into a deep depression. Confirmation of what I had long suspected should have been vindicating, but instead I felt overwhelmed by grief. Every memory now needed to be re-examined through this new lens. Had anything in my childhood been real? Had anyone in my family ever actually known me? David was my rock during this time. He listened without judgment as I processed my discoveries. "What do you want to do with this information?" he finally asked, after I had spent days cycling through shock, anger, and sorrow. "I want the truth to come out," I said. "Not for revenge, but because I need to reclaim my story, and because the rest of the family deserves to know who my parents really are." I reached out to Jasmine, now a practicing therapist herself, who flew to Seattle to help me process my next steps. Together with David, we strategized the healthiest approach to confrontation. Jasmine emphasized the importance of not engaging in the same manipulative tactics my parents had used. "This is about setting the record straight, not punishing them," she reminded me. "Their own actions will do that." I also began working with my own therapist on preparing emotionally for the confrontation. We discussed the likely responses from my parents, from denial to counterattacks, and how I could maintain my composure and boundaries through it all. "Your truth is powerful on its own," she told me. "You do not need to embellish or emotionally manipulate to be believed." After months of preparation, an opportunity arose. The annual family reunion was scheduled for July at a lakeside resort in New Hampshire. The event typically lasted a full week, with different branches of the family coming and going as their schedules allowed. It would provide the perfect setting to address everyone at once. I arranged to arrive on Wednesday, the day when attendance would be highest. David came with me for support, but agreed to stay in the background unless I needed him. I had organized my evidence carefully, backing up the photos and documents both physically and digitally. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say, focusing on facts rather than emotions, though the hurt was still raw. When we arrived at the resort, the usual family dynamics immediately fell into place. My parents performed their roles as the devoted mother and father worried about their difficult middle child, but still supporting her through everything. Relatives who had only heard their version of events for years regarded me with that familiar mixture of pity and caution. Only Thomas, who had been increasingly questioning the family narrative since I had visited to search the attic, seemed genuinely pleased to see me. That evening, our extended family gathered for the traditional big dinner that marked the midpoint of the reunion week. Nearly 40 relatives were present, from elderly great-aunts to young cousins. After the main course had been cleared and before dessert was served, I stood up and gently tapped my glass for attention. "I want to thank everyone for welcoming me today." I began, my heart pounding but my voice steady. It means a lot to be included in these family gatherings, especially since I know many of you have certain impressions about me and why I have been absent from so many family events over the years. The room quieted, an awkward tension settling over the tables. My mother's smile froze on her face. "For as long as I can remember, I have been portrayed as the troubled child, the difficult one, the family problem," I continued. "I accepted this label for many years, even came to believe it myself. But recently I discovered something that changed everything I thought I knew about my place in this family." I opened my laptop, which I had connected to a small portable projector I had brought specifically for this purpose. On the blank wall behind me appeared the first image, a page from my mother's journal explicitly describing how she had blamed me for Abigail's failing grades. "These are my mother's journals," I said quietly. "There are dozens of entries like this one detailing a systematic campaign to use me as the scapegoat for anything that threatened the perfect family image." My father stood up abruptly. "Chloe, this is inappropriate and taken completely out of context. Your mother keeps journals as creative writing exercises. They are fiction." "Are bank statements fiction too?" I asked, changing the image to show the documentation of my drained college fund. "Is this official letter congratulating me on the art scholarship I never knew I received also fiction? Are these altered family photographs, where my achievements were literally cut out before being shared with all of you? Just creative exercises?" One by one, I displayed the evidence, narrating calmly what each piece represented. The room was deadly silent, except for occasional gasps or murmurs. My mother had gone pale, while my father continued to interrupt with increasingly weak objections. "This is ridiculous. Chloe has always had emotional problems. She is manipulating these documents to paint herself as a victim." He insisted, but his usual authoritative tone had a desperate edge. To my surprise, it was Abigail who spoke next. She had been watching the presentation with a strange expression, somewhere between shock and dawning recognition. "It is true. she said quietly. I always knew I was favored, but I did not understand the extent. Mum and Dad told me Chloe was jealous of me, that she made up stories about being treated unfairly. She turned to look at me with tears in her eyes. There were so many times they blamed you for things I had done. The money that went missing on the main vacation that was me. I took it to buy a bracelet I wanted. When they confronted me privately, Dad said they would handle it, and that I should not worry. Her confession sent a ripple of shock through the room. My mother reached for Abigail's arm, hissing something under her breath, but my sister pulled away. No, Mum, this has gone on long enough. I have felt guilty for years, but convinced myself it was not that bad. Seeing it all laid out like this, I cannot stay silent anymore. Thomas stood up next his lawyer's composure, momentarily abandoned. I want to see that bank statement again, he said, approaching the projection. After studying it for a moment, his face hardened. This is the same bank where I have my accounts. These are legitimate statements, not forgeries. He turned to face our parents. You told me Chloe received the same college support I did. This shows her fund was emptied before she even applied to schools. My mother finally found her voice. You are all turning against us based on out-of-context snippets and old documents. Everything we did was for this family to maintain our reputation and success. By destroying mine, I asked, surprised by the calm in my voice. By systematically lying about me to everyone who should have been my support system. The next hour unfolded in a series of revelations, denials, and confrontations. Some relatives were immediately supportive, horrified by the evidence before them. Others were reluctant to accept that they had been manipulated for so long. A few, particularly those closest to my parents, attempted to defend them or suggest I was exaggerating. Throughout it all, I maintained my composure, letting the evidence speak for itself. I did not yell or make accusations beyond what I could prove with documentation. I did not need to. The truth so long suppressed had a power of its own. Eventually, my father attempted to regain control of the situation with his familiar authoritative tactic. This has been a very dramatic performance by Chloe, as usual. I think we have all had enough family drama for one evening. We can discuss this privately as a family should. No, I said firmly. This has been handled privately for far too long. That is how you have controlled the narrative. Everyone here deserves to know the truth about the family they thought they knew. If you continue with this, you are no longer our daughter. My mother said, her voice cold and final. I looked at her for a long moment, recognizing the manipulation tactic for what it was, a last desperate attempt to regain control. I think the evidence shows I never really was, except when it suited your purposes. My parents left the reunion that night, unable to face the family now that their carefully constructed facade had crumbled. As they walked out, the silence in their wake was profound. Then one by one, relatives began to approach me, some with apologies, others with questions, many with tears and embraces that had been withheld for years. In the days following the reunion, my phone did not stop ringing. Relatives who had been present called to express their shock and support. Those who had not been there called after hearing what had happened, some skeptical, until I sent them copies of the evidence, others immediately apologetic for believing the worst about me for so many years. Through these conversations, I discovered additional lies my parents had told about me. My cousin Megan revealed that she had sent me birthday presents every year that I had never received or acknowledged, leading her to believe I did not care about maintaining our once close relationship. My uncle Benjamin disclosed that he had invited me to his retirement party specifically to offer me a position in his design firm, but had been told by my mother that I was not interested in family charity. Most painfully, I learned that my grandmother had set aside a special piece of family jewelry for me, which my mother had claimed I had pawned during a rebellious phase. The necklace had actually been given to Abigail, who was horrified to learn its intended recipient. Thomas took it upon himself to confront our parents separately after they had retreated to their home. They are in complete denial, he reported back. Dad tried to convince me that your evidence was fabricated. When I pointed out that I had verified the bank statements myself, he claimed they had diverted your college fund with your knowledge to pay for art classes you had demanded. Mum keeps saying everything has been misunderstood and taken out of context. The most telling response came when Thomas asked directly why they had lied about me for so many years. After several deflections, our mother had finally said, "Families need balance. Someone has to be the responsible one, someone has to be the baby, and someone has to be the difficult one. Chloe was strongest. She could handle it." This twisted logic that systematically destroying my reputation and self-worth was somehow a compliment to my strength was perhaps the most revealing insight into my mother's distorted thinking. My parents continued their attempts to rewrite history even in the face of irrefutable evidence. They sent a family-wide email claiming they were deeply hurt by Chloe's mischaracterization of our family dynamic and suggesting that I was manipulating everyone for attention. Few were persuaded. The evidence I had presented was too concrete, and now that others were looking back on their own experiences with me, through this new lens, many instances of inconsistencies in my parents' stories became apparent. Abigail and I had several long, difficult conversations. She had been both victim and beneficiary of our parents' manipulations, given advantages at my expense, but also used as the standard I could never meet. I always felt there was something wrong with how they treated you, she admitted, but it was easier to believe their explanations than to question the preferential treatment I received. Through Abigail, I learned more details about how my parents had diverted money meant for me. The college fund had apparently gone to renovations for our parents' vacation home, which they had told the family was funded through a work bonus of my father's. A trust from my great-grandfather that should have been divided equally had been entirely given to Thomas and Abigail for their first home purchases, with the family told that I had already received my portion for rehabilitation programs. The financial deceptions prompted me to consult a lawyer about possible legal action. While there were grounds for a civil case regarding the misappropriated funds, pursuing it would mean prolonged contact with my parents and further family turmoil. After much consideration, I decided that the emotional cost outweighed any potential financial compensation. My freedom from their manipulation was worth more than the money they had stolen. The family divided in the aftermath of these revelations. Most accepted the truth once presented with evidence, but some, particularly those who had been closest to my parents and most invested in the family mythology, could not reconcile the perfect couple they thought they knew with these acts of calculated cruelty. A few older relatives suggested that family loyalty should supersede dwelling on past mistakes, essentially asking me to continue sacrificing my truth for family harmony. I lost relationships with these relatives, a painful but necessary separation. I could not pretend that what had happened was simply a misunderstanding or exaggeration, not when I had spent my entire life suffering the consequences of deliberate lies. As word spread beyond our immediate family, my parents' carefully constructed social standing began to crumble. Friends and community members, who had heard about their difficult daughter for years, now looked at them with new skepticism. Their invitations to social events dwindled. The image they had sacrificed my well-being to maintain was ironically destroyed by the very truth they had tried to suppress. Through Thomas, I learnt that my parents were making increasingly desperate attempts to regain control of the narrative. They claimed I had manipulated or misunderstood the evidence, that they had only ever acted out of concern for me, that my current success proved their tough love approach had worked. When these explanations failed to convince, they began suggesting I had mental health issues that caused me to fabricate conspiracies against them. But perhaps the most revealing conversation came from Abigail, who finally shared the full extent of how she had benefited from being positioned as the good daughter. She had always received not just material advantages, but emotional support and unconditional pride that had been withheld from me. I was given permission to make mistakes, she said thoughtfully. When I failed or messed up, it was treated as a learning experience. When you did the same things, it was evidence of your inherent problems. This insight helped me understand the fundamental inequity that had shaped our childhoods. It had never been about specific incidents or behaviors. The roles had been assigned early, and everything that happened was filtered through those predetermined narratives. No achievement of mine could overcome my designated role as the problem child, just as no mistake of Abigail's could tarnish her golden child status. It was a devastating realization, but also a liberating one. I had never had a fair chance to be judged on my own merits within my family. The game had been rigged from the start. Recognizing this helped me finally release the lingering questions about what I could have done differently or how I might have earned their approval. 6 months after the family reunion that changed everything, I sat on the balcony of my Seattle apartment watching the sunset over Puget Sound. David had moved in, and we were discussing wedding plans, a future I could now envision, without the shadow of family dysfunction hanging over it. The half year since the confrontation had been a time of profound adjustment and healing. I had established clear boundaries with my parents, who still refused to acknowledge the full truth of their actions. After several attempts at manipulative communications from them, including guilt-inducing holiday cards and tearful voicemails claiming I was tearing the family apart, I had made the difficult decision to cut contact entirely. It is not about punishment. I had explained to Thomas, who understood, but still maintained limited contact with them. It is about protecting the peace and truth I have finally found. They have shown no genuine remorse or understanding of the harm they caused. Until that changes, having them in my life is damaging to my mental health. This decision, while painful, was ultimately freeing. For the first time, I was prioritizing my own well-being over the appearance of family harmony. I was no longer willing to sacrifice my truth to maintain their fiction. With the family members who had acknowledged the truth and offered genuine remorse, I began building new, healthier relationships. Thomas and his wife made a point of visiting Seattle twice during those 6 months, bringing their children and creating positive new family memories. We talked openly about our childhood, filling in gaps in each other's understanding and processing. Together, the manipulation we had both experienced in different ways. My relationship with Abigail was more complicated. She carried both guilt for her role in my scapegoating and resentment for having her perfect daughter image revealed as artificial. Our conversations were sometimes tense, sometimes tearful, but always honest. Slowly, we were discovering who we might be to each other without our parents' influence defining our relationship. Extended family members reached out in various ways. Aunt Margaret, who had shown small kindnesses and doubts throughout the years, became a particularly important presence in my life. I always sensed something was wrong, she admitted during a long phone call, but I was too afraid of being ostracized myself to speak up more forcefully. I will always regret that. Her honesty about her own failure to protect me was exactly what I needed, an acknowledgement that adults who should have questioned the narrative had failed me, not because I was actually problematic, but because standing against the established family story was too difficult. The healing process was not linear. I worked intensively with my therapist to process the years of gaslighting and emotional abuse. There were days when grief overwhelmed me, mourning not just the childhood I had lost, but the family relationships that might have been. There were moments when anger surged fierce and consuming at the deliberate cruelty that had shaped so much of my life. But there were also moments of profound liberation. Each time I trusted my own memory without doubt, each time I spoke my truth without fear, each time I set a boundary without guilt, I reclaimed a piece of myself that had been stolen through years of manipulation. David's unwavering support throughout this process deepened our relationship in ways I had not anticipated. I fell in love with who you are, he told me one night when I worried that all this family drama was more than he had signed up for. Watching you reclaim your story only makes me admire you more. 3 months after the confrontation, Jasmine organized what she called a chosen family gathering. She flew to Seattle along with a few other close friends from college, joining David and my local friend circle for a weekend celebration. "We are here to honor your courage," she said, raising a glass in toast, "and to be the family that sees you, truly sees you, exactly as you are." That weekend was a powerful reminder that family is ultimately about love and truth, not blood or obligation. The connections I had formed with people who chose to know and love the real me were more genuine than many of the family relationships that had been built on lies. The most challenging aspect of healing was learning to trust my own memories and perceptions again. Years of being told that what I remembered was wrong, that what I experienced was not real, had created deep cognitive distortions that did not disappear simply because I now had proof I had been right all along. I still found myself doubting my recollections, questioning my judgment, and automatically assuming blame in conflicts. My therapist helped me recognize these patterns and develop techniques to ground myself in reality when old doubts surfaced. "Put your hand on your heart," she instructed, and say, "What I remember is real. What I feel is valid." It sounds simple, but these physical anchors can help reconnect your mind and body when gaslighting has separated them. Gradually, these affirmations became less necessary as I rebuilt trust in my own experience. The fear that I might somehow be fundamentally unworthy or defective, so carefully cultivated by my parents, began to lose its grip as I surrounded myself with people who valued me authentically. Setting boundaries became another crucial skill. I learned to recognize manipulation tactics immediately, from guilt trips to invalidation to selective memory. When distant family members suggested I should forgive and forget for the sake of family harmony, I could now calmly decline without the crushing guilt such requests would have previously triggered. 5 months after the confrontation, Thomas called with the news that our parents were divorcing. Apparently, once they could not unite against you, they discovered they do not actually like each other very much, he said with grim humor. The perfect marriage, like the perfect family, had been largely performative, another facade maintained at tremendous cost. Around the same time, Aunt Margaret shared a revelation that initially shook me, but ultimately brought another piece of understanding. "I suspected what was happening to you for years," she admitted. "But your mother had a way of isolating anyone who questioned her methods. The few times I tried to intervene, I found myself excluded from family events, subjected to rumors about my own stability. Eventually, I convinced myself that maybe they were right about you, because the alternative was too painful to acknowledge." Her confession illuminated how thoroughly my parents had controlled the family narrative. They had created an environment where questioning their treatment of me carried social penalties no one was willing to risk. Understanding this helped me release some of the anger I had carried toward family members who had witnessed my mistreatment but remained silent. As the months passed, I found myself moving from raw pain to a more contemplative understanding of the dynamics that had shaped my family. My parents were deeply flawed people, whose own insecurities and need for control had led them to sacrifice my well-being for their image. While this understanding did not excuse their actions, it helped me see them as damaged humans rather than all-powerful tormentors. In time, I even found a measure of compassion for them. Not enough to welcome them back into my life without genuine change on their part, but enough to wish them healing from whatever wounds had led them to inflict such damage on their own child. David and I bought a house together, a craftsman bungalow with a garden and plenty of natural light for my home art studio. As we decorated, I made conscious choices that reflected who I truly was, not who I had been told to be. Bold colours, eclectic art, comfortable spaces for gathering friends, all elements of a home that felt authentically mine, in a way my childhood house never had. On a quiet Sunday morning, as David and I discussed our wedding plans, the topic of family inevitably arose. "I know it is traditional to have your father walk you down the aisle," he said carefully, "but what feels right to you?" I considered the question, realizing I felt no obligation to include my parents in this significant life event. "I think I will ask Thomas," I decided, "and maybe have Aunt Margaret give a reading or blessing. The people who have supported my journey toward truth deserve to be part of celebrating where that journey has led me." The wedding would be small, intimate, with chosen family prominently featured alongside the blood relatives who had earned their place through love and truth. It would be a beginning built on authenticity rather than appearance, the exact opposite of the values that had defined my childhood family. "Do you think you will ever reconcile with your parents?" David asked, not for the first time. "I do not know," I answered honestly. "I am open to it if they ever truly acknowledge what they did and show genuine remorse. But I have stopped waiting for an apology I may never receive. I have given myself permission to move forward either way." That was perhaps the most profound healing of all, releasing the need for validation from the very people who had worked so hard to undermine it. I was creating my own legacy now, one built on honesty and mutual respect rather than manipulation and appearances. As the sun set over the Sound, painting the sky in vivid orange and pink, I thought about the journals I had started keeping again. Not secret records of gaslighting like my childhood diaries, but reflections on growth, creativity, and building a life of integrity. The story I was writing now was entirely my own, unfiltered through my parents' distorted lens. Family secrets have a way of surfacing no matter how carefully they are buried. The truth about my childhood had finally emerged, painful but ultimately liberating. In losing the false version of family my parents had constructed, I had gained something far more valuable: the freedom to define family on my own terms, to surround myself with people who saw and valued the real me. The family I was building now, both with David and with my chosen circle of support, was founded on the principle that love should never require lies. That true connection comes from seeing each other authentically, flaws and all, and choosing to remain present anyway. The scars of my childhood would always be part of me, but they no longer defined me. Like kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold, those broken places had been mended into something stronger and more beautiful than before. The truth had set me free, not just from my parents' lies, but from the doubt and shame those lies had planted within me. As twilight deepened into night, I considered how family is ultimately defined not by blood, but by who shows up with truth and love when it matters most. By that definition, I was no longer the family outcast, but incredibly rich in authentic connection. Have you ever discovered that someone close to you was spreading lies about you behind your back? How did you handle that betrayal, and were you able to rebuild trust afterward? I would be truly interested to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, Please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family betrayal and finding your own truth. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, you deserve to be seen and valued for who you truly are, not who others need you to be.